Hey, what's going on, folks? This is Hellbent, and today I'm going to release my newest update to my pClass scripting tool. So what the pClasses are is just a bunch of different classes that allow you to create customizable controls, so that way you don't have to constantly use the default controls for your GUIs. What I hope is that before you start trying to use this is that you have some familiarity with creating a GUI using the default controls, because a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about and that you need to do is built on knowing how to do those other things. If you're just getting into it, I would suggest at least you know how to create a control, set its position, attach variables to it, attach it to labels, how to make it execute some code when you interact with that control, and so on and so forth. So this update is I've added in the pTab class. So the last update I had done was just for the custom buttons, or the P buttons. So if you want to create these kind of custom buttons right here, I'll leave a link in the description to the video that covers how to use the tool to create those, what you need to do. This time we're going to be working on the P tabs and how you create customizable tabs to use in your script. I'm a little bit rusty, so this is probably going to take a while. Hopefully not too long, but I'll just I'm going to try to just gloss over things, and if you have any questions, try it out, play around with the values, and if you have any questions, just leave a comment down below, and usually I'm pretty good at answering questions that are specifically about the topic. Okay, so let's go into it. So in the description of this video, there's going to be a link to this tool. Currently, all it has is the P button class added into it and the P tab class added into it. Technically, all the classes, the checkbox class and the radio class, they're included in the code, but the tool itself, this is a scripting aid to use to make using the classes a little bit easier. Technically, those classes, the checkbox class and the radio class, are actually included in the script. They just don't show you how to use them. They're not doing anything, it's just included. So for example, so if you're not a newbie, if you've been working around these things for a while, then you might be able to just dissect what the class is. So here's the checkbox class. You might be able to look at it and say, oh, okay, I know what's going on. I know how I can go about using this class, or the radio class, for example, right? I do have, for example, one of the recent auto clickers I did, I think it was the Smart Clicker version 1.2, 1.3, has an example of using the checkbox class. So if you were to get a copy of that script and dissect the code, you can actually see it has examples of the buttons, it has examples of the tabs, and it has examples of the checkbox. So let me see if I can pull that up. The version 2. So the version 2. So here's an example of the tabs. So in the code for this, there's an example of how those tabs are set up. I'm going to be showing you that today, but also it has examples for the buttons, so how to add buttons. So there's code that shows how to do that, right? How to add these customized buttons up here, as well as checkboxes. So you can create these customized checkboxes. What it doesn't have is an example of the radio button. The radio button and the checkboxes are very similar, but there's a little bit difference. But if you're good at figuring things out, you can go into the code for this script that I'm releasing today, and find the class and figure out, okay, what do I need to do to make this class work? Okay, so let's go into it. So I've already created a new script. It has nothing in it yet, so we'll go through the process of creating a script that uses these custom tabs. Okay, I strained my wrist there for a second. Oh, that hurts. Okay, so let's do it. Now, I'll note, don't worry about how I make the tabs look. The overall structure of them will be the same throughout, but the way that they look is depending on the values that you give it, the color combinations, etc., etc. Those things are gonna change the way it looks. So if you don't like the way that the tabs that I'm going to be creating during this demo, you don't particularly like how they look, change the colors, because really it's all about mixing and matching the different colors together to get something that looks the way you want it to look. So with this, I can create something that looks almost identical to the normal tabs, or I can create something that looks completely different, that's all rainbow colored and everything, right? So don't worry about that you don't particularly like the design that I'm going to be making for this demo, or perhaps you don't like the design that I've made here. Play around with the values and you'll be able to create all kinds of different things. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a script. So the first thing I'm going to do before I use this tool, this tool is just to make using the class a little bit easier. The whole purpose of these classes is to create these custom controls with almost the effort it takes to create these controls is almost identical to creating a default control. So you get custom controls that take almost no more effort than it did to create a default control. So let's go through single instance. I'm just gonna rush through this. Single instance force. I'm gonna create a GUI. GUI1, and I'm going to give it some options, always on top. I'm going to do, what else am I going to do? I'm going to remove the DPI scaling. And I think I'm okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a background color for it. This is all stuff you should already know how to do. I'm going to make it I'm going to give it a font. I'm just going to leave it what's the default? I'm having a brain fart. Whatever the default is, it's what the hell is it called? Arial. I'm just gonna leave it Arial. I think it's Arial. Okay, I'm gonna show my GUI. So this is the main window. This is your whole GUI, the outer shell of your GUI. So it's everything that's encased in here, everything. And then afterwards, we're gonna create new windows to create our new tabs. Okay, so I'm gonna make it, I don't care, I'll just have it pop up in the center of the screen, so I'll just do the width and the height. So I'll do a width of, let's say, 400 and a height of, let's say, 300. Demo, I'll call it demo. I'll add in my return and my GUI close. I haven't done much scripting, actually almost no scripting at all in a couple of months, so I'm very rusty. And I also haven't done any tutorials in a while, so very, very rusty. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this, and here we go. We have a GUI. It's got a dark gray color to it. It's 400 pixels by 300 pixels, blah, blah, blah. Now what I want is I want to add some tabs that I can switch between. So I want to have a bunch of different controls, and each tab has a bunch of different controls that I'm using. So let's go ahead and add our tabs. So the first thing I need to do is the setup. Now the setup for this is, I probably could have done it without this. I'm just going to hit the when I have the P tab selected, I'm going to hit clip setup, and up at the top of my script, underneath all my setup things, my parameters, the things I'm going to be setting up here, like my chord mode, my single instance, my batch lines, etc., where I'm starting to set my variables, I'm just going to paste that in. So I've clipped it, I hit clip setup, that puts it into my clipboard, and I'm going to paste it in. Now, what I suggest you do is get rid of this line here. Get rid of this include p tab class. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take the whole class itself and we're going to paste it into the bottom of our script. So we can share it with people without having to worry about any problems. We don't have to worry about including our libraries, etc., etc. We're just going to include the whole class into the bottom of our script. So down at the bottom, if I want to make it so that way it highlights it so that it says, hey, this stuff down here is part of this class that we're not going to be, that it's going to be needed to do the code, but we don't actually need to look at it or anything like that. So I'm just going to do like that. And now what I'm going to do is after that line, I'm going to paste in the class. To do that, I just come to the tool and I hit clip full tab 1 class. Click. Now it's in my clipboard. Come down here, paste it in. So this is the full class and all the functions and methods associated with it. Okay, so now that I have the class in my script, I can go ahead and start using that class. So all I've done is I've created a global variable called ptab1, or set it as an object. So now I can start creating new instances of the ptab object class, whatever. And I've added the class. Okay, now we can go ahead and start adding in the tabs. Now the way the tabs work is when you create a normal tab, what you would do is you would create a line like this. GUI 1 add tab, and then it's got a bunch of different ones like tab 3 for example, right? And then you give it a position, and then after that, so let's say X blah blah blah, Y blah blah blah, you know, variables blah blah blah, right? And then afterwards you start actually adding in the tabs. So it'll be like tab the first tab. So this is the text that displays on that tab, the first tab. Right, and then I'd add in my lines, so I want that one to be selected, and then I'd add more tabs, blah blah blah, right, and then etc., etc. So then after I've done that, after I've added in that line, in order to actually add in the controls that are associated with each of those tabs, I would do something like, it's been a long time, so I might get this wrong, but this is just for saying this is how you would normally do it, right? So it'd be like GUI 1 tab, I don't remember, tab, and then you give the name of the first tab. So the first tab is there. And now I can go ahead and start adding in controls. GUI 1 add button. So after I've declared this line here, so I've created my tabs. Now I've said that the controls that follow this line here are all associated with that first tab, right? I'd add in all my controls, and then when I'm done, when I want to add things to my second tab, I would do that same thing again. It would be like GUI 1 tab, and then tab number 2. And then I add in all my buttons and my checkboxes and whatever I want to have in that tab. Okay, so that's how you would normally add in GUI tabs. This has a very similar thing, but it's slightly different. So rather than we declare our tabs the same way we would, kind of the same way there, but each tab is its own control. So rather than GUI tab, and then at the very end where I add the text, having the pipes delineated names for the different tabs, instead of doing that, each tab has its own line. Where you go and actually add in the tabs, where I said, okay, everything that follows this line here is part of tab 1. Everything that follows this line is part of tab 2. Everything that follows this line is part of tab 3. In this case, what we're going to do, instead of doing it like that, is each tab gets its own window. So what we need is we'll have our parent window, the main window, and then each of the tabs themselves get their own window that has the main window as its parent. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our tabs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through this and fill out its information. If you want, what you might want afterwards is a reference to what the different tabs are doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and you can just do it this way. You don't need to use this. You do not need to use this. If it's easier for you to use these edit boxes here, go ahead and use them. If not, you can just take this and then just edit this to be hold on. No, forget about that. Forget about what I just said. Let's use this. This is just I'm going to use this as a prototype, so afterwards when I want to edit, so I'm going to fill everything in here, and then I'm going to paste that, and it's going to look similar to this. If I want to start editing things, playing around with its X position, Y position, by me copying this line here and commenting it out, I can see what the order of those arguments are, so I can edit the things that I've filled in for those arguments a little bit easier. So let's go ahead. The first thing is the window name. What window contains that tab? Like not what tab, not what window is that tab going to control, but what window am I putting all these buttons, these tab buttons on. In my case, I'm going to be putting it on my first GUI, GUI 1. So the window name that I'm going to be putting them on is window 1. Next is the name of the particular tab. So I'm going to give each tab a unique name. So let's say, if, for example, if I was recreating this here, perhaps the first tab I'll name P button. So I'll name tab 1. The first tab will be T button, or whatever I want. Perhaps I'll just call it tab 1. The next thing is what label I'm going to be attaching it to. So in your GUI, you can have multiple sets of different tabs. What you want to do, you don't absolutely have to attach them to their own label, but what I suggest you do is for each group of tabs. So this is all one group of tabs. So this group of tabs has 5 different individual tabs. So for each group of tabs, I want to attach them to one label. So I'll call it label group 1. Right? I can call this label whatever I want. It's just the same normal convention for creating labels. The next argument that I need is the starting state. So if I want the tab to be selected when I first run the program, I'll set it to have a start state of 1. All the other tabs have a state of 0. To make this simple, I'm going to make it so that way the first tab is selected when I run the program, and all the other tabs are zeros. And then I can select whatever tab I want. So the first tab, I'm going to set it to a value of 1, meaning that it's the currently selected tab. And then I'm going to, because I might be able to create, like I said, multiple groups of tabs. So this GUI only has one group, this group up here. I might have multiple groups, but anyways, I'm going to give them a group name. So you can give it a name. It's a variable, and you can give it a name that's associated with what that group is doing. Like what kind of group of tabs, like what functions are those tabs doing. So I'm just going to call it G1 just to make it simple. Group 1. Next, I'm going to position my first tab. I'll make them kind of like this along the top of the GUI. So I'll do, let's say X10. X10. For some reason, I don't know why, but if I press tab to switch between the edit fields, for some reason it's not actually going to tab through it. On the first window, it does work by tabbing. I can tab through them, but for whatever reason, and I don't care to fix it, for whatever reason, I can't tab through these edits. So you just have to manually go to the next tab, manually go to the next one. So I'll do Y10. Width of, let's say, 150, and I'll do a height of 40. So X position, Y position, width, height. The next several arguments are, the first one is the background color. So the buttons themselves, the tab buttons themselves, have multiple different layers. The first layer is the background layer, and it'll be very difficult for you to see, but to the right of this button here, there is you'll see 1 pixel thick of a black line, and underneath the bottom of it there's also a 1 pixel black line. This is kind of to make it look like a shadow or depth, some depth to the button. It's just aesthetics. So I'll do it the same way as being black. So my button has a little bit of shadowing to the right and bottom. The next 2 arguments are, what color is the trim? So in these examples here, I have trim that is yellow and gray. So the first one is when the tab is not selected. So this yellow color, because this P button tab isn't selected, so it's got yellow. The second one is, what do I want that trim to look like when I actually select it? So right, as I can see up here, I have this grayish color, silver color. So I'll do something similar to like that. I'll do, let's say, 555555. Okay, the next 2 colors is, what do I want the top of the tab button to look like? So the first one is, what color is the top of the tab button when it's not selected, and then what color is it when I select it? So I'll make them a reddish color, make them stand out a little bit. No, I'll make them a dark color. I'll make it like 444444 for when it's not selected, and I'll make it a little bit darker when I select it. So I'll do 111111 when I select it. The next is the trim size. Me personally, I prefer just to stick with the trim size of 1, but you can change it down so that you don't have any trim. So all these colors that I created, this black, this yellow, etc., none of them matter by setting this to 0. So all you have is whatever you set for your top color and your bottom color. So basically it's just a rectangle with that one color, and it changes. But if you want to have the border around it, the trim around it, the shadowing, then set it to 1 or 2 pixels thick or 3 pixels thick. My personal opinion is that when you start getting into the 2 pixels thick, 3 pixels thick, depending on the size of the control overall, it makes it start to look a little bit weird. But if you're making really, really big buttons, you can adjust the trim size. The next 2 things are to do with the text. So by default, the text will align itself in the center along the x-axis, but it doesn't align itself along the y-axis by default. So depending on what I set for the size of the font I'm using and the type of font that I'm using, I'm going to need, and the height of the button that I'm creating, I'm going to need to play around with that y offset. So that way, maybe for me, I'd prefer to have my text centered in the y-axis, but maybe you don't want it centered. Maybe you want the text to be up at the top of the button. Maybe you want it at the bottom of the button, etc., etc. This is what I play around with. I play around with the offset, the y-axis offset, so that way, after I've created my button, and if I see that the text isn't quite centered, I'll adjust the offset to make it closer to what I want. just from experience, I'll put this closer to, let's say, about 6 to start with. I know that I'm going to need to adjust it afterwards, but I'll just give it a 6 for now, and then once I've ran the program, I'll see where the text is, and I'll make adjustments to that. The last thing is, what text do I want to appear on that button? I'll make it the same that I have up here. So the first one, I'll make P button. So that's just the text that's going to show up on that button, on that tab. And that's it. Now that I have that, I'm going to clip this and put it into my script. So I'm going to hit clip P tab. Now it's in my clipboard, and I'm just going to paste it in. By default, I have it set up so that way it automatically increments the index. So what we're doing is every tab is an index in an array. So if I have 5 tabs, there is I've created an array of objects with each tab having its own index. So the first tab that I just created now has an index of 1. What I suggest you do, like I said, I've set it up so by default it'll automatically make it so that way you don't have to worry about putting in a number there. But what I suggest you do is, in the order that you add things, change the number. So instead of me putting the length of that array plus 1, I'm just going to get rid of that, and since I know that this is my first tab, I'm just going to change that to tab 1. P tab index 1 equals a new progress tab. When I add more tabs, the next one will be P tab number 2, P tab number 3, P tab number 4. The reason why I suggest you change it from the default to actually putting in the number is because if you want to do something with that tab later, it's a lot easier for you to know, okay, which tab, which of those controls do I want? If I just have P tab length and if I have 100 of them, I don't know which one this is. I don't know which one this is. But if I've numbered them myself, then I know that this is number 1, this is number 2, etc., etc. Okay, so let me get rid of that. So like I said, I suggest you change that what it has for default, and whatever tab number you're on, just change that to that number. So the next one, when I go ahead and add a new tab, it's going to be tab number 2, and then tab number 3, etc., etc. Okay. So right now we have enough to run this, except I haven't created that label. So we've attached this to a label, but that label doesn't currently exist. So I'm just going to copy that name, and I'm going to come down here, paste that in, and just add in a return for now. Actually, you know what I might as well do is, there's a couple of things that I need to put in this label in order for the tabs to work. The main thing is the appearance of the tab. So to get the tab to actually switch appearance, where it looks like I've selected it, looks like I've selected this one, this one, this one. To do that, there's a function that I need to add to that label. The function is clip tab swap. So I'm going to click that button, and I'm going to come here, I'm going to paste that in, and that pastes in this function here, a call to this function here, which does the image swap. This calls up a couple of methods from the class itself, blah blah blah. So anyways, at the top of my label, I put this in, and now, even though technically I'm not going to be able to switch tabs, I make it look, I can make the button look different. And we'll add in the actual switching the tabs in a few minutes. So now I can go ahead and run this, and because I only have one tab, I can't actually swap. But what I can do is I can now play around with my spacing. So that offset that I was talking about, now I can go ahead and play around with that. I'm going to move this out of the way because we don't need this anymore. Because from now on, we can just take this and duplicate it and edit it. So I'm going to get rid of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. If I'm not sure, I can look at the arguments up here. So the argument I'm looking for is Y text offset. And I can see from here it's the second last argument, which is this one here, which I happen to know is a 6. So I can see that my button is a little bit the text is a little bit too close to the top. I want to lower it a little bit, so I'm going to increase the offset. I'll go to, let's say, 10. run it again. And I'm good. I'm happy enough. It's not exactly perfect, but I'm happy for this demo purpose. If I need it to, I could adjust it again. Now this offset is based on, you know, the height of my button and also the size of my font and the font type that I'm using. So as I switch between different font sizes, etc., different button sizes, this offset is going to need to be changed. Okay. So now I have that. Now let's go ahead and add in a couple more tabs. So I'm going to change the width of this. I'm going to make it so that way I can have 3 tabs, and I'm going to have it so that way the spacing is nice. So I need to do a little tiny bit of math here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the width of this button to be 100. And for the GUI itself, I'm going to change the width so that way there's a 10 pixel border here, and then between each of my 3 controls I have a 10 pixel border. So I need 3 times, so I need 300, so 100 for each button. That gives me 300 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 40. I might messed up there. I think I need 340. So I'm going to make the width 340 so that way when I create 3 tabs, everything's all centered nicely. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm just going to duplicate this and edit it for my next 2 tabs. So I'm going to select anywhere in it, press Control D to duplicate it, and this one is going to be P tab number 2. The window is going to be the same. The name of this control is different, so this is going to be tab number 2. The label is going to be the same. The state, because I only want one of my tabs to start with the selected state, so this one is going to be a 0. So it's currently not selected when I run the program. The next one is the group name. The group name, they're all part of the same group, so the group name stays the same. The position I'm going to need to adjust. So the X position is the only thing I need to adjust, so that's 110, 120. And that's it. The rest, the width and the height is going to be the same. I'm going to leave the same color scheme. The only last thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change the text. And like I said, I'm just going to copy this and just use the same text. So this is P tab 1. This is just the text that's related to that tab. The offset's going to be the same because I haven't changed the font or the size of the button. And the, what's this? What's this one again? The trim size. The trim size I'm going to leave the same. And I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to duplicate this line. I'm going to change the name of that tab, like the variable associated with it. I'm going to leave it attached to the same label. I'm going to leave it as a 0. It's not selected to begin with. It's part of the same group. The X position is the only position that I need to change. So it's 100, 120, 130, 230. 230, 340. Yeah, that's okay. I think I did my math right there. Okay. And I'm going to change this to be P checkbox. Okay. And this is, I need to make sure I change this number here, which is one of the things you have to be careful of. Or you can leave it as it was at default, where it automatically increments to the next number. But I prefer to do it where I manually put it in, because then I can tell which one is which. Okay, and there we go. So I have my ugly tabs with my ugly color scheme. But now, because I have them attached to this label and I'm calling up this function here, I should be able to click on them and swap between them. Right? And if I don't like those colors, I can just go in and change some of the colors around. So I'll leave that as that. What I'll do is I'm going to change all of these. No. I'm going to do, okay, for the trim, I'm just changing some of the colors. So the first color I'm changing is the trim. This is what you'll have to do to play around, get a color scheme that you like. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to make them look nice. That's your job. Okay, I like that. That color is good enough for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate, copy this so that way I can do them all that way. Okay, so there I go. I have my tabs. And I can switch between them. But they're not actually doing anything yet. I'm just pressing down on these buttons, but they're not attached to any code. So like I said before, this is the process of creating adding that GUI add tab 3, and then I add a bunch of different tabs to that name. Now is where we start adding the controls to the individual tabs. Unlike before, where I do GUI 1, add tab, add buttons, and then the next time I add the other things, this time it's going to be new windows. So instead of doing GUI 1, tab number 1, and then adding all my buttons and my checkboxes, blah, 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 instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create new windows for all those controls. And I'm going to make this window the parent for all the other inner tabs, or the inner windows. So what I'll do is I'll differentiate everything. So I'll say tab 1. This is just so that way I can navigate through my code a little bit easier and program it all out easy. So tab 1. And now I can go ahead and do this. So GUI, I'm going to make this GUI number 2, and I'm going to give it some options. There's a couple options I need to give this. The first one is I'm going to say plus parent 1. So I'm going to make window 1 the parent for GUI number 2. GUI 1 is now the parent of GUI 2. I'm also going to remove all the caption from around that window. So all this border and all the buttons and everything, I'm going to get rid of that by typing in -caption. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of any DPI scaling. Okay, next I'm going to give the window a color. You don't have to do this. This is just optional stuff. And I'll make it a little bit lighter than the original window. So I'll make it, let's say, 25, 25, 25. Just a little bit lighter. What I'll also do to help make it pop a little bit more is I'll add a border to it. These ones here, you can't see how I have all these yellow. This isn't a typical border. What this is actually just a bunch of different progress bars that I've made 1 pixel thick. I created a function that I can just pass some arguments to it, and then it'll automatically draw 4 different lines to create a border. So all of these different lines, like the edit boxes with all the yellow around it, it's just 4 lines drawn around a normal edit box. So if you want to do that, you'll have to work how to do that. It's included in the code, so if you go through the code, you can see how to do it, or how I did it, if you want to do it something like that. But anyways, so like I said, I added a border. The border makes it 1 pixel off, like the If I wanted it to be centered, it's going to be 1 pixel off just because of that border, or maybe it's 2 pixels off. But anyways, I'll add it in anyways. It shouldn't look too wonky. Color, blah blah blah, and I'll just add in 1 or 2 controls just to show you that, to show how to add the controls. So for tab 1, I've created the window, or I've added the options to the window. I've colored the window. I can do my font for that window. I'm just going to leave the font default, but I would do, add the font for that window. Actually, you know what? I do need to do the font. GUI 2, because it's going to be on a pretty much black background, and the default text is black. Font, color white. But I'll leave everything else about it the same. And then I can go ahead and add in some controls. GUI 2, add button. X10, Y10, width 200, height 30. This is a sample button. Okay, maybe I'll add a checkbox. Maybe I want to add tabs inside of here, whatever. GUI 2, add checkbox. I think I can just let it size itself and it'll, let me do it. Let me X. Okay. So there I have my the stuff that's going to go on the first tab, and then I'll go ahead and I'll quickly duplicate this. I'll duplicate this. No, here, let me copy all of that. And I'll just paste it in and edit it so that way I don't have to type that all out again. So this is going to be tab number 2 now, and this is going to be window 3. To help make the windows, the different tabs, like the windows for the tabs, pop a little bit, what I'll do is I'll adjust the color of them just a little bit. So let's go with like 303030, so it's a little bit lighter this time. I'll move the buttons a little bit more, so let's say I'll put this over at 100. No, I'll make it 50. Just so that when I switch the tabs, you can see that the tabs are switching. Okay, so that's tab 2, and then I'll do it again for tab 3, for the last tab. This is going to be GUI number 4. And I'll make this one 35, 35, 35. I'll leave that. I'll move, this time I'll move the Y, I'll move that to 30, and I'll move the Y to 30, and I'll move this Y to 100. Okay. I think we have enough to do that. Okay. Whatever tab that I selected to be the thing that's active, I'm going to now show the window associated with that. So in this case, the tab 1 is the one that starts with the starting state of being selected. The other ones have a 0. They're not selected. So I'm going to show the window that's associated with tab 1. So under here, GUI 2, show, and I'm going to position it within this GUI. So all of my XY coordinates are going to be relative to this top corner up here. So I'm going to put it so that way it's 10 pixels underneath these buttons, or the tab buttons, and it just fills up this space here. So I'll do, what are the height of those? So they start at Y10 and they are 40 pixels, so that's 50, 60. So Y, I'll do, X is going to be 10, so it's going to be 10 pixels over from the edge. The Y is going to be 60 pixels down because we have 10 pixel border there. The button itself is 40, and then I'm going to give it another 10 pixels before the window starts. The width is just subtracting the X10, so I'm going to have a 10 pixel border here, and on the opposite side I'm going to have a 10 pixel border. So that's 20 pixels subtracted from the width of this one. So that gives me 320, and the height is going to be that Y60, it's going to be 60, 70. I'm going to leave a 10 pixel border at the bottom, so that gives me 70 pixels off of the height of this. So 230. And that's it. That's what I need for that. I can run this now. It's still not going to work the way swap between the tabs, but now I have this where I have it showing tab number 1 with its button in it and its checkbox in it. But now I need to make it so that way I can switch between these tabs. The way we do this is in the label for this group, which is this label here, label for group 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loop the number of tabs that I have in this group. So in this case I have three tabs. So I'm going to loop 3 times. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if, so what it's doing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if the current, so whenever I select one of these tabs, it puts whatever I named that particular tab. So if I come up here, I've named the first tab tab 1. So when this has a name, a variable associated called tab 1. Every time I click on one of these, it's going to take that name for the thing that I just clicked, and it's going to put it into a variable, built-in variable called a GUI control. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if the name of the current control matches, like as I'm looping through, is the current, so I have 3 buttons. It's going to be the first is going to be on the first tab. It's going to say, okay, does the name of the currently selected tab equal the name of the tab in the first index? You know, I'll just type it out. What I'm going to say is if p tab 1, that's the name of the array of objects, and I'm going to use the current index as I'm looping through. If that dot name is equal to, so if the name of the currently indexed, as I'm looping through, the currently indexed object in my array, if its name also matches up with the current name stored in the GUI control. If it does, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show that window. So to show it, because what I'm going to use the index, I'm going to use the current index of my loop, but because the index doesn't line up with the actual window names, because right here GUI 1 is the outer window, but all the inner windows like tab 1 is actually on window 2. Tab 2 is actually on window 3, right? But what I could also have is tab 1 is on window 16. Tab 2 is on window 18. Right? So what I need to do is I need to do some offset the math so that way I'll take the index and add or subtract from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say because my offset is only 1, this is going to be very easy, but just keep in mind that you have to offset because you're not going to be, the window that you're going to be hiding or showing isn't chances are it's not going to be the same as the index. Like it's not going to be the first window, the first tab isn't actually on window 1, it's on window 2. So what I'm going to do is GUI, and I'm going to do this as an expression. So I'm going to put a percent mark and then a space, and I'm going to take the built-in variable aIndex, the current value for the index, and I'm going to offset it. So to begin with, the aIndex is equals 1, but I don't want to hide window 1. What I want is to hide tab 1. Tab 1 is on window 2, so I'm going to take the index and I'm going to add 1 to it. So when an index equals 1, the window I'm going to be hiding is window 2. When an index equals 2, I'm going to add 1 to it, and I'm going to be hiding window 3, etc., etc. Okay, then I'm going to add a space, in quotes, I'm going to do a colon, and then show. And then outside of the quotes, I'm going to add a comma, and I'm going to take these exact dimensions that I have here, and I'm going to paste those in. Because for the first window, it doesn't matter. It's always going to remember what these dimensions were. But because I haven't shown window 3 or 4 up here, if I was currently trying to switch to tab 2 or tab 3, it doesn't have any dimensions for it. So I'm just going to make sure I copy those dimensions so that way it knows all the windows. All the windows will have their proper dimensions. Okay, so if the tab that I selected matches up, it's going to show that window. Other words, what it's going to do is it's going to hide those windows. So else, I'm going to just copy this line. So if I'm on tab 1, go ahead and show GUI number 2 at those coordinates. Other words, hide that particular window. So I don't need the coordinates for hiding. And I can just change this show to hide. So if it's the tab that I want, show it. In other words, hide it. So I have 3 different windows for tabs. One of them is going to get shown, 2 of them are going to get hidden. And that's it. We're done. That's it. So now I have tab 1, which is the P button tab. This tab, you see that the button moved a little bit, right? So it's a different tab, and there. And there you go. So that's how you use the class tool and the class itself to create your own customized tabs, to create whatever you want with a little bit more variety than you get with the default gray buttons. Anyways, we're at 53 minutes. I know it was a little bit long, but you know, there's a lot to go over, and I'm not a very fast typer, and I want to make sure I'm thorough, so you know, whatever. Anyways, if you have any questions about it, I don't remember if I said it, but in the beginning, but there's the link to the tool in the description. So just go to the paste bin, copy it from the paste bin, put it into a new script, and then run the script, and then do what we did here. Like if you have any questions about how things work, or if you run into any problems, like for instance, these tabs here, the way it's structured, because these are all layered controls, I can't have like an image behind them. I can't put a control, like an image control, a picture control, or something like that underneath these buttons. There's ways around it. For instance, what you can do, just as an example of something that you can do, you're probably not going to encounter this, but what you can do is, I really don't recommend it, but let's say if I really wanted to put a picture behind that I wanted my tabs to be sitting on top of a picture or something, what I can do is I can have each one of these tab buttons as their own window, kind of like this, but you'd have to alter the code a lot. I don't recommend doing that. But a simple thing you can do is have your parent window, your main window, which is just basically where everything is going to be sitting. So everything's sitting, and then in that you can create another window that just contains your tab button. So for example, if I look where all these five tab buttons, there's a little yellow border all around it. That's the size of another window. So they're all on their own window. So this the outside of this GUI is one window. Those tab buttons sit on another window, and then each of the tabs have their own window. So just a few things that you can do to play around with it. These, if you're curious, this ability for me to drag it along or minimize or close it, etc. Those are just buttons that don't have the click function added to it, so it doesn't change when I click on it. So it has the hover mode, but it doesn't have the click, like it doesn't change when I click it. So that's how you do those. So you can get rid of the caption, you can get rid of all this caption, create your own title bar or caption bar or whatever you want to call it. But just some ideas you can play around with. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. I should have what is it going to be next? I should have the checkbox class added to this tool. I don't know when. I don't know. Maybe a week from now, maybe a day from now, maybe 2 months from now. I don't know. I'll get around to it when I get around to it. Anyways, peace. I'm out.